Okay. So again, this morning we will have a review about the sampling technique, so that after you have after securing your certificate from the Research Ethics Committee, you know what to do in the selection process of your respondents or your participants. So the first thing is you have to know what type of sampling technique are you going to use. So for example, for quantitative descriptive research, your sampling design may be purposive sampling. When you say, diba, purposive sampling, you have your special or unique na inclusion criteria in selecting your respondents. So you have to make sure that before giving your questionnaire to that certain person, you have to ensure first na nag-fit in sila sa inyong criteria. Meaning, whatever you set, kailangan nandun yung characteristic na yun sa kanila. Or for example, your inclusion criteria should be 18 years old and above, and then resident of General Santos City, tapos may another certain characteristic pa. Okay, so that's purposive sampling. Now, your even sa selection sa inyong plant material, if your study is an experimental study and then you are going to select your plant material, it can also be purposive. Kasi we will be setting criteria also in selecting the plant material. For example, you just need one part or the whole plant. Kung one part lang, example, it will be the leaves. And then, what else? It's devoid of any like insects or bugs or yung mga kagat-kagat ng uod, di ba? Merong mga dahon class na may mga butas-butas na kasi merong uod doon. So, pwedeng hindi niyo yun siya isali. Another thing is, yung ano pa ba siya, old na siya na leaves or kailangan bata pa siya na leaves. So, yun yung mga kailangan yun na criteria na para sa inyong selection of the plant material, magiging purposive siya. Okay? Okay, yeah, I saw the news. Okay lang. Ayan. Now, that's purposive sampling. Now, others can use convenience sampling. Just review your sampling technique and make sure that you will be following that kasi your panelists will be looking at that during the final defense. And the panelists will really ask you how did you do the sampling technique. So, kailangan step by step yan siya, na-follow. Yes, white lang ang screen. Wala pa akong nagsalata. Okay. And then again, for those class na yung nakalagay sa sampling technique is convenience sampling, then you just have to make sure na if you set a time kung kailan kayo mag-data gather, kung sino lang yung andon, yun lang yung mabibigyan nyo ng questionnaire ninyo. So for example, your respondents are the pharmacists in the community. So in General Santos City. So like you are going to give your questionnaire and kung sino lang yung available. So pagdating niyo sa community pharmacy, kung ito lang yung available, then yun lang ang mabibigyan ng questionnaire. Again, that is convenience sampling. Okay? For those na merong quota sampling, it doesn't matter how you are going to select them as long as you reach the quota na naset ninyo. So for example, 100 person lang, then you just give the questionnaire to 100 person, and then pag na-return nila yun lahat, then you are good na with your data gathering. So, pero for this researches, kung meron kayong human subjects, before having an estimate kung ilang sample kung ilang respondents yun, kailangan nyo muna malaman yung population. So I hope ngayon, alam nyo na ang population ng study ninyo. Example, residents of General Santos City, you have now a rough estimate kung ilan yung residents ng Gensan. Or if it is a certain barangay, I hope ngayon pa lang alam nyo na kung how many how many persons are living in that certain barangay. So that will be your population. And then, after knowing the population, that's the time you compute the sample size. So let's just have a short review on how to know the sample size of your study. So again, after getting the population, we will be computing for the sample size. And most of the time, we will be using the Sloven's formula for this. Okay, Sloven's formula tayo. So I hope you can still remember, this is N is equal to capital letter N divided by 1 plus capital letter N times E squared. Wherein the small letter N here is your sample size, and then the capital letter N is your population. Again, this is your population divided by 1, and then again this capital letter N here is the population, and then E is the allowable room for error. And then for most quantitative descriptive study, we use 5% here, so that will be equivalent to 0.05. So let's just have an example. For example, yung population ninyo for a certain barangay lang is 10,000. So yan yung nakuha ninyo na rough estimate. It does not really need to be the exact number of population. It is good if you have the exact number. But if you cannot really get the exact number of the population, then you can just have a rough estimate for it. As long as meron din kayong background kung saan nyo kinuha yung estimate ninyo or yung estimation ninyo. So when computing, you have here like 10,000 as the population. So 1 plus 10,000 times E squared. So that is 0.05 and then squared. So let's continue. N is equal to 10,000 divided by 1 plus 10,000. And then E squared, let me just get my calculator. 0.05 squared is 0.0025. Okay, so this is 10,000 divided by, i-simplify ko na lang ito. 10,000 times 0.0025 is 25 plus 1, that is 26. So 10,000 divided by 26, let's round it off to the nearest whole number. So just like my lesson yesterday sa QC, you cannot really have a sample na decimal. Like, dili pwede magkaroon og person na 0.86 or 0.62, dili pwede ana. So always yan siya nira-round off to the nearest whole number, and this is 385. So don't forget, those studies class na quantitative descriptive, if you have a population of 10,000, your sample size should be 385. Okay, 385 dapat ito lahat. So you have to look for these people, and depende na kung purposive sampling, they have to be mag-fit in sila sa inyong criteria. If quota sampling, it doesn't matter as long as you get the 385. For convenience sampling, it doesn't matter also sa convenience sampling kasi kung sino lang naman yung andon pagpunta ninyo, yun lang yung mabibigyan ng inyong questionnaire. Okay? So that's convenience sampling. Now, if it is class A probability sampling, remember we have two types of sampling, the general types, probability and non-probability. Probability is giving chance to all members of the population to be selected in your study. So this is your population, this is your sample. So if you have 10,000, pag probability sampling, you have to make sure that they have equal chance to be selected and be part of this 385. So that's when we do random sampling, stratified sampling, cluster sampling, and what's the other one? Systematic sampling. Okay, so again, you have to give chance to them. Like sa random sampling, you can do lottery method, you can do the fishbowl method. Lisod kayo, no? You will have 10,000 names and then ilagay niyo siya sa like lalagyan, fishbowl, just to give them equal chance. So kaya naintindihan ko na most of the studies are using non-probability sampling. Sa non-probability sampling, we are not really giving equal chances for all the members of the population to be included in the study. So just like when you do quota sampling, so it doesn't matter kung paano nyo siya kinuha or sinelect yung inyong mga respondents, as long as you hit the target, then that's it. Kung convenience, kung sino lang yung andon, yun lang ang mabibigyan. So pagpunta nyo ng example sa hospital, kung sino lang yung naka-duty, yun lang yung makakasagot sa inyong questionnaire. And sa purposive sampling, it's up to the judgment of the researcher kung kasali ba yung isang person as a respondent or hindi based on the predetermined inclusion criteria. So I hope sundin nyo yan siya. Kapag selection process na kayo ng inyong respondents. Kasi your study will be invalidated if hindi nyo sinunod ang sampling technique ninyo. Kaya nagre-review tayo ngayon kasi parang matagal na tayo nag-discuss nito, summer pa. Do you have questions or clarifications? Can you look at your sampling technique? Have a review of it, and then if you have questions, you may ask me now kung paano ninyo himuon ang inyong sampling technique. Again, for experimental studies, your plant materials may be selected using purposive sampling. So whatever criteria na sinet nyo dyan sa paper ninyo, kailangan sundin ninyo yan. Kung sinabing adult leaves talaga yan siya. Pag sinabi ninyong umaga kayo magko-collect, kailangan umaga talaga magko-collect. Kasi yung plant materials natin, there is actually a difference in the time of harvest. So kung makakita kayo ng literatures niyan, then that will be very good. And meron yan siyang effect in the phytochemicals of the plant. So for example, you have the target phytochemical and then ibang time nyo siya hinarvest, it might cause variation in the result of your study kasi konti lang yung phytochemical na supposedly kailangan ninyo, konti lang siya kasi different yung time of harvest o kaya different part or kaya different na yung antawag dyan, yung age ng plant part na yan. Okay? So be careful with that. And for the animals, it might be purposive sampling pa rin kasi you will still have your criteria like kailangan puti lang tanan, and some will have criteria sa weight sa animals or even the sex of the animals. Merong mga criteria na ganun. So purposive sampling pa rin yun siya. Okay? But during the experimentation, during the assignment, kailangan maging random na siya. Okay? Random assignment na tayo. When I say random assignment, example, you have 20 animals. Random dapat natin siya i-assign for each treatment group. Okay? So, kailangan yung 20 animals nyo have equal chance to be assigned in the treatment group, positive control group, or negative control group. Okay? Bigyan nyo sila, i-random nyo. Wag nyong piliin na, example, kani dool ni siya sa kuha mo, ni siya ang sa treatment group. Dili naman good na siya random assignment. Okay? That's the case also with the experimental group involving bacteria. Because you will prepare Petri dishes of your bacteria, and you will also randomly assign them if you will be giving them the treatment, the positive control, or the negative control. Okay? So that is for the sample and the sampling technique. I hope clear na yan siya. Now, balik tayo konti doon sa computation of the sample size. If you will not use the Sloven's formula, ayaw nyo mag-compute. I think I have mentioned this sa inyo last summer, that the Rausoft calculator. So you can just search this sa Google and you will see sample size calculator by Rausoft. And then ang gagawin lang is to input your population size here. Okay, in this part. Okay na itong margin of error, that's 5%. It will always be 5%, though we can set this 1%, pero that will be very strict. So 5%, and then the remaining 95% will be our confidence interval, and we will no longer edit this response distribution kasi it should be normally distributed. That's 50%. So population size lang ang ini-edit. Depende sa population size ninyo. So, kung 10,000 pa rin, lagay nyo lang dyan 10,000 and there will be a recommended sample size and that is 370. So, may difference sila ni Sloven's formula. Kanina sa Sloven's formula, that's 385. This time for the Rausoft calculator, that's 370. But take note that both of them are accepted in research. You just have to divulge in your paper under the sampling technique that when you computed for the sample size, you use either the Sloven's formula or the Rausoft para it will be clear sa panel and sa reader kung paano nyo nakuha yung certain sample size ninyo. Okay? Questions? Clarifications about the sampling technique? Wale, sure na yun. Sure na taan na. Wala mo eh. Pangutan na. Wait lang. Sige. Okay, next, let's discuss the results section of the paper. Remember, our format is IMRAD. We are done with the introduction as well as the methodology. So the next one is the results section of the paper. So this is where you are going to report the findings of your study. And the findings, syempre, will be achieved through doing your methodology or your methodologies. Okay, so you are going to collect information by doing the data gathering procedure. Now, the results of your study will be arranged in logical sequence and then without bias, and take note, without interpretation, because the interpretation of the results will be done in the discussion section. I hope that is clear kasi para hindi tayo paulit-ulit, that's the mistake of the previous batches kasi na pinapaulit yung paper nila during the defense kasi naglalagay ng interpretation in the results section. I want to be clear with that. The interpretation of the results will be included in the discussion section. Meaning in the results section, we will just present the result. Pwede din tayong magbigay ng a little explanation as long as it's not an interpretation. Okay? Or we can just describe the result of your paper or of your data gathering in your paper. So explanation lang or description. Presentation and then explanation or description. And then importance of a good results section. When you are going to formulate the results section class, it is important to remember that wala pa talaga kayong na-prove na anything in your research. Though you have your result, pero it doesn't mean you have proved something. Please take note of that. Kasi kaya nga may recommendation section under the discussion section kasi the result of your study will just be used for future studies pa. So wala siyang yung sure ka na yes, ito na talaga yung nakita namin na may na-prove na kami na something with our research. So walang ganun. Especially sa experimental na research. Now, the page length of the results section is dependent in the amount of data and as well as the type of data that you are going to report. And then avoid providing data that is not critical to answering the research question. So take note that the data that we will be providing in the results section will be dependent in the statement of the problem. So go back to the statement of the problem of your research and kung ano yung mga questions doon, yun lang ang sasagutin natin. Again, yun lang ang sasagutin natin in your paper. If ever you have, meron kayong na-discover along the way, pero hindi naman siya answer to the questions in the statement of the problem, then hindi natin siya isasali. Okay? Hindi tayo mag-i-include ng result na hindi mo naman tinanong in the statement of the problem. Therefore, what are the contents of the results section of your paper? The first thing is you have to have an introductory paragraph in your results section, but itong introductory paragraph will contain the research problem of your study, meaning you will just have to restate the research problem of your study. Now, after restating the research problem or the objectives of your study, you can now present your results. Pwede siya non-textual elements, meaning hindi siya words or paragraphs. Pwedeng you can present your study using, you can present the findings of your study using figures, charts, photos, maps, and most of the time we use the tables in presenting our result. Okay, if appropriate. So again, most of the time we will be using the table, and then for some other non-textual elements, depende siya if applicable. Now, after the non-textual element of the presentation of the study, you can provide a textual description. Again, textual description of the result, and this is where you highlight the most relevant findings of the study. Okay? Sa ano na siya? Sa textual part na siya mag-highlight sa pinaka-importante na result. So, take note na walang interpretation dyan. I-highlight nyo lang doon sa after sa table, you will have the paragraph na highlight nyo yung pinaka-importante. And then, you will have to provide a short paragraph also that concludes the results section by synthesizing the key findings of the study. So, the end part of the results section will have to summarize the key findings of your study, the most relevant findings of the study. Again, walang interpretation. Description lang of the table, for example, and highlight lang the most relevant information na nakuha ninyo. Now, take note that you are going to use past tense sa results ninyo since you are done with the data gathering, you are done with the procedure. So, naka-past tense ito lahat. Okay? So, ano siya? Reference to findings should always be described as having already happened because the method of data gathering has been completed. So yun yung reason why naka-past tense siya dapat. What time is it? 8:18. I can finish this siguro mga past 8:30. Now my remaining 1 hour pa, I will give that time sa inyo to start revising your paper class, because remember, sa final defense, naka-past tense na dapat lahat. So you can change na your, for example, scope and delimitation. You can also change the methodology part of your study. All parts of the methodology will be changed into past tense. So since meron kayong extra time ngayon, you can meet with your group and you may start doing the revision. Okay, kay kung sa May pa mo mag-revise ana inyong pag-past tense, makulangan na taog time. Okay? So dili lang result section ang naka-past tense, pati ang methodology section and some parts of the introduction. Okay? So daghan pa og buhaton aside from the data gathering. Now, for the sequence of the results of the study, you have to follow the order of the statement of the problem. If your first statement of the problem is asking about the demographic profile of your respondents, yan dapat yung mauna ding i-present in the results section. Dili pwede nga naa siya sa last. Dapat kung paano nakapasunod ang SOP, yan din yung sequence ng results of the study. The contents in chronological order, ganito ha, table ang mauna, or kung applicable ang graphs, mauna yan sila. And then that should be followed by a textual presentation. So we have presentation of data. We will be arranging the data into logical, chronological, and significant categories and classifications. Now, we have 3 ways of presenting our data. It can be textual, tabular, or graphical. Pabalik sa sequence kadali. This one. Again, it should follow the SOP ha. So, tanawan ninyo inyuhang SOP number 1. Maupo dapat na inyuhang table number 1. Okay? And so on. And then again, in presenting the data, una dapat yung non-textual element. So, mauna dapat either si table or si graph, whatever is applicable in your research. And then, to be followed by the textual presentation. Okay? Okay na tayo dyan. So for the presentation of data, again, we can use itong textual, ano talaga ito? This is for everyone. You really have to present your data na using the textual presentation. But itong tabular and graphical, depende siya sa needs sa inyong study. So for the tabular presentation, this one is the most commonly used non-textual element in the presentation of data. Tabular means you are going to organize and compress your data using tables. So bakit siya pinaka-ginagamit? Kasi when you present your data using tables, you will just need little na explanation of the data kasi naka-arrange na siya systematically. And we will assume that the readers can comprehend and understand the information easily if tingnan nila yung table natin. As long as maganda yung pagkagawa ng table, then we don't have problem with with the understanding of our readers regarding sa results ng ating study. So without even reading the textual presentation, I hope the readers can easily understand and interpret the results of your study. So again, we will be using tabular presentation. Now, in constructing our table, what you need to have is the title, the table, example, table, and then number. So if that's table number 1, so that you just write table number 1, and you have to provide a heading. So example, table number 1, demographic profile of the respondents. So yan yung magiging title niya. Okay? So let me show you an example. Let me just open a certain study for this para makita niyo siya kung paano siya ina-arrange. Where can I find that? Research office. Some. Okay. So this one is the study of the group of Miss Osano. And if we look at their paper, let's review their statement of the problem first. Marami silang statement of the problem, 6. So ang unang pangutana, AED, approximate effective dose. Number 2, baseline blood glucose. Tapos blood glucose level after induction with alloxan. And then blood glucose level before and after treatment of the following. And then they have the quality control. And lastly, they have the inferential statistic. Is there a significant difference between the blood glucose level of the Swiss albino mice na binigyan ng treatment? So when we look at their results section, Okay, so this one is the results section of their study. They have the introductory paragraph restating the objective of the study. And then take note, they have now the first one, the first result of the study, and that talks about the approximate effective dose. So you will have here the subheading so that your readers will know kung unsa na siya nga result. Okay? So, meron silang introductory paragraph actually that will just be restating what they have done to get this result para ma-review yung reader kung ano yung ginawa nila. Tapos, ito na, this will be the title of the table. So, meron ka dyan table 1 and then the heading niya, approximate effective dose. And this is how they present their result. So, naka-table siya with proper labels ha. Ito yung dose na ginamit. Ang ilaga kay duhaman kabuok, male and female. They included also a result of the weight of the mice para lang sa reference. Kasi ang dose nila may milligram per kilogram eh. And then they have the baseline, the induced, and then this one is the results. And always remember that when you present your data in a table, kailangan ang end part niyan is a description, or we may call it verbal interpretation, para mas madaling ma-interpret siya and ma-understand ng reader natin. Kasi kung hanggang dito lang sila sa 200, itong 24 hours, hindi malalaman ng reader natin kung ano ibig sabihin yan. Okay, that's the blood glucose level, then ano yan? So kailangan lagyan natin siya ng verbal interpretation. So you may have a legend sa baba. What does it mean when it says negative or positive? So just like sa kanila, pag sinabing negative, it means there is no decrease in the blood glucose level after the treatment. Kung positive, merong decrease. Okay? So, kagaya nito, at this dose level, 10 milligrams per kilograms, negative ang result kasi walang decrease in the blood glucose level. The rest of the doses, positive na. Now, take note, after the table, nandito na yung kanilang description or explanation. So, meron silang textual presentation of the data. They just described actually the table and i-highlight lang the most important result. Okay? So that is also true with the second one. So just like this one is their second statement of the problem. So ganun pa rin yung presentation. Mauuna si table, a little a little introduction of what the readers can see sa table na yan, and then the table itself. And then actually, ano kulang man eh. Dapat may verbal explanation or description pa na siya sa table after. Okay? So that's how you do the results section using a table class. Any question? Wala? Sure na? So the next one will be the graphical presentation. So from the name itself, graphical, so syempre we have the graphs here. You can use charts or graphs in presenting your study. Now we have different types of graph. We have the bar, line, circle, pictogram, and map graph. And ang pag-choose ninyo dito is depende din sa result ng inyong study or if it is still applicable in your study to use a graphical presentation. Most of the time, ginagamit si graphical presentation if you have a question in the statement of the problem about the demographic profile. So yun yung most of the time ginagamitan ng graph. So you can choose whether to use pie graph, just like this one. Ito yung mostly ko nakikita sa mga researches, especially for the demographic profile. Pero minsan kasi pinapatransfer siya ng panel sa appendices. So ang gusto lang minsan ng panel, pinapaiwan yung table, yung graph doon na sa appendices. Pero you can still do this. Pwede siyang nakalagay sa appendices para lang ma-summarize talaga yung demographic profile. Mas madali kasing tingnan yung graph. For example, sa sex ng inyong respondents, mas madaling makita kung ilang percent ang babae, ilang percent ang lalaki. Okay? Or you can use the bar charts. This one, depende again sa need ng study ninyo. Organizational chart, I don't think merong study na kailangan mag-present ng organizational chart. The same thing with the pictographs. Ano bitong tawo-tawo ka na sa una sa math na to, no? Ay picture, and then that picture will represent certain number of people. So example, isa ka picture or isa ka picture sa tao means 10. 10 persons yun siya all in all. So that's what you call a pictograph. Pero again, I don't think merong study na kailangan ng pictograph. And then this one is also a cosmograph. So dili na nato palisdan-lisdan ang atong sarili kasi aside sa mahirap ito gawin, mahirap din siya intindihin. So mag-table na lang tayo. And then others would use the line graph if applicable only sa study. And the flow chart, pero ang flow chart natin ginagamit kasi natin not on the results section but in the methodology section. But anyway, these are the types of graphs that you may use in presenting the results of your study. Lastly, we have the textual presentation. For example, you have the table. After that, you will be describing the data in a textual form. Okay? So, i-describe mo lang and then ang pinaka-importante lang is you have to highlight the important data na nandoon sa table or sa graph mo. Okay? So, for example, ang question is, what is the approximate effective dose? I-highlight mo yung napili natin na approximate effective dose. Okay? Now, organization and approach in writing the results section. Take note, you have to present a synopsis of the results followed by an explanation of key findings. So for table, and then after that, textual presentation. But sa textual presentation, a little summary or description of the findings of the study, followed by a highlight of the key findings. Okay? So present the result and then explain it. Meaning mauna si table or si graph before the explanation. And then the end part will be like an overall synopsis of everything. That will be on the last part, very last part of the results section. After mo na-present lahat, magbibigay tayo ng parang summary of the results of the study with the highlight only sa key results or key findings. Now, these are the things that we need to avoid when you are going to make the results section of your paper. Una, nasabi ko na ito, do not discuss or interpret your result. Just present it, describe what is in the table or what is in the graph, and highlight the most salient result. Do not discuss it, do not interpret it. The discussion or the interpretation of the result will be included in the discussion section. Okay? Now, do not report background information or do not attempt to explain your findings. Again, do not explain your findings because we will do that sa discussion section. And please do not include background information about the results of your study. When you say background information, it might be the result of other studies that are related to your own study na pwede siyang naging background, meaning naging related literature siya or related study. Doon natin ito i-include lahat sa discussion section. And take note, class, do not ignore negative results. If your results are negative, then we don't have a problem with that. That is still a result of your study. So just like the study I presented a while ago, they also presented na itong dose na ito negative. So i-report niyo pa rin siya kahit negative siya. Okay? Okay, sige, Krisha. And do not include class raw data or intermediate calculations. The raw data, yung data nyo talaga during the experiment, most of the time kasi we will just include in the table the mean, the standard deviation, and yung verbal interpretation. Yung raw data, most of the time nakikita yan siya sa appendices. And especially the calculations, if you have for example, calculations na ginawa, like sa calculation ng dose, dun yun lahat sa appendices makikita. Hindi yan siya nilalagay sa results section. Okay? So be as factual and concise as possible in reporting your findings. It does not necessarily mean na pag results masyadong mahaba. Let us be concise. Kung ano lang yung result natin, yan lang yung ipepresent sa table, yan lang din yung ipepresent using the textual presentation. Okay? Presenting the same data or repeating the same information more than once, you have to avoid this one also. Baka paulit-ulit na lang, na-present mo na sa table number 1, pero-present mo na naman sa table number 2 kasi for example, gusto mo ng comparison. So, hindi na. Doon na yun siya sa table number 1. Iba na dapat ang table number 2. Depende sa iyong SOP. And then, avoid confusing figures with tables. So, kung table class, table lang. Kung figures like mga graphs, graphs lang din. So, again, most of the time, the panel will really look for tables, not for the graphs. So, i-table na lang natin siya. Yung sa demographic profile, pwede tayong gumamit ng graph, pero ilagay na lang natin siya sa results. Sa appendices. Sa appendices na section. So, that's it for the results section of the paper. You cannot actually visualize this hangtod wala mo'y results. So, mauna siyang ako ang dilemma. And then again, paunang discussion na lang, at least you will have a picture sa kung ano yung gagawin ninyo pag meron na kayong results. And then, aayusin na lang natin siya class pag may results na kayo. I think that will be on March pa. Okay? Questions so far? Questions? Anyone na may gustong i-clarify?